So
Okay, we're
just
recording,
get
right?
the background to the Gemara that we are going to learn today. How Avshalom, the son of David, how bad behavior, what he did, and what was his punishment. And this is part of a list of the Mishnah in 10b2 listed the principle a measure for a measure, which means HaKadosh Baruch Hu punishes those that deserve to be punished and rewards those that has to be rewarded. So in the list now, the second example which Mishnah says mentioned about Avshalom. Now it will be very interesting if you have a chance to read in the book of Samuel B, couple of chapters, how things happened in David's family, about he had Amnon and Tamar. It was terrible, terrible stories there. Now to concentrate, if as I said, if you be have time to look at the chapters Samuel Bet from chapter 13, the whole story, Amnon and Tamar, a brother and sister, that was the terrible thing, and Avshalom was a brother to Tamar, and he killed Avshalom, Tamar killed Amnon the way that he treated Tamar. At any rate, now we say what Avshalom also, he was hoping to, he killed everybody that might be heirs of David because he thought he will be able to inherit the kingdom and to be the king. So, as I said, I actually forgot the whole story. Now I managed to read quickly to refresh the memory. So I suggest just that when you have a time, Samuel Bet from chapter 13, a couple of chapters, to see that we know about King David, and for us, King David, but he didn't have such a good family life. At any rate, we come to the Gemara. The Mishnah says that Avshalom, where is it? Avshalom. Yeah, 10b5. 10b5. Number 4, just a minute. No, need to have been, as I said before, 10b4. The last line in the English translation of the first column. The Gemara returns to our Mishnah to elaborate upon second example of the principle of measure for measure. As I said to you, the Mishnah there gives a whole list of what happened, the measure for a measure, and Avshalom is the second example, how he misbehaved, and therefore a measure for a measure, how did he finish his life. The Mishnah said, Avshalom nidgai b'saro. Avshalom gloried in his hair. In other words, we'll see in a moment, he grew up his hair and he tried to beautify himself. the Gemara cites a Braita that provides the source for which is known that Avshalom glorified in his heir. Tanu Rabbanan. Rabbis taught in a Braita, Avshalom bisarom arad, Avshalom rebelled against Hashem with his heir, שנאמר, ובאבשלום לא היה איש יפה, it is stated, and there was no beautiful man in Israel like Avshalom. So, in other words, he that said, doesn't see yet what was wrong with that. The commentary in the bottom says that he was not blemished with any sin from head to toe. It is the righteousness that led the Jewish nation to accept the possibility that he was their true leader, replacing David. So, in one way, he had maybe some qualities that he could be the heir of David, but Avshalom was misled by the eminent people who supported him to think that David had lost his rights to rule Israel because of that indiscretion. So, in fact, what he was planning how to rebel against his father David and to be able to get, at the end of every year, he would shave. What's that? It shaved his hair because it became heavy upon him, and he shaved it. So the hair was so heavy, it weighed 200 shekels by the king's weight. In other words, he used to weigh the weight of the hair. However, the Gemara, in the meantime, makes a note that what did it mean by the king's weight? The weight of Avshalom heir was 200 times the weight of the stone with which the people of Tiberias, and the people of Tzipori weighed. So this is just by the way to tell us how big and long his hair was. But the Gemara continues with the story. Because the way that the full story is how he tried to gather supporters which will eventually, in his mind, his plan to bring him to inherit the kingdom. But the Gemara says the heir which he tried to grow and to beautify, in fact, brought to his death. לפיכך, this is measure for a measure, לפיכך נקלע בשערו, therefore, Avshalom was hung by his heir. And they recites the story שנאמר, ויקרב שלום לפני עבדי דוד, as it is stated, Avshalom chanced upon David's servants. Avshalom was riding upon a mule, and the mule came under the thick. Now we turn the page to 10b5. The mule came under branches of a large elm tree, and his head became entangled in his elm, in the tree, and he was suspended between, he was like hanging between the heavens and the earth. In other words, he was riding on the mule, because while the mule that was under him moved on, he was was riding on the mule, the mule, he was hung now with his hair by the tree. The mule continued to go, and he remained hanging between, as he said, between heaven and earth. He was just hanging on a tree. Now the Gemara continues. He wanted to save himself. He took his sword and wanted to cut his hair to free himself from the tree. Tana de Rabbi Ishmael taught at the time the depths opened by beneath him. He therefore could not save himself by cutting himself loose. If he would cut himself loose, he would just fall into this big hole, and he won't be able to, in any case, to save. The Gemara actually said that it was a Gehenom. You can see in the note 50. According to another version, he saw Gehenom opening under him. The term Shaul used by our Gemara also sometimes refers to Gehenom. He therefore, you know what Gehenom? Gehenom is hell. He therefore preferred to be killed by his father's servants so that his acceptance of his fate would atone for his mistakes. Alternatively, he was hoping that he would be captured alive and brought back to his father, to David. So this is the scenery. Now, what happened is, which is missing here, that Yoav, King David, let's say general or whatever, he actually, when he was hanging, so he actually, let me just find the verse in the Bible. I describes what happened. That Yoav took 14 and said, Yoav, it is not proper for me to beg before you. And he took 3 darts in his hand and thrust him through the heart of Avshalom, who was still alive in the midst of the oak. And 10 young men that bore Yoav's armor came round in a circle and smote Avshalom and slew him. And Yoav blew the shofar, and the people returned from pursuing after Israel, for Yoav held back the people. So it was almost a big mutiny. And so this was the way, the end of Avshalom life for his misconduct. Now the Gemara goes a little bit further to say when King David heard, after all, it was his son, he didn't want to kill him. The father has got Rachmones on his son. So the text said, the verse describes David's reaction to the death of Absalom. And it says, the king trembled. He ascended to the upper chamber of his gateway and wept. And thus he said as he went, my son Absalom, my son Absalom. If only I could have died in your place. Absalom, my son. The king rubbed his face, and the king cried out in a loud voice, my son Absalom, Absalom, my son. So, although that Absalom did not behave like a son, he actually probably had in mind somehow to cause King David to die. Excuse me, because he was hoping he was hoping that he will uh, be the king. Nevertheless, you see a father's rachmones on his son. How much David knew Avshalom misbehavior. In effect, the whole story in the Bible, he didn't want to see him and so on. But nevertheless, I think I've got energy. It's already here, coming to be after the winter. We've got spring, and as you remember, allergy to spring. So, nevertheless, the Rachmones, and I think this is something which is interesting to note. The Rachmones that the father have on his son is more than the son for his father. We have a couple of examples where the Gemara brings it. So here one of them. Avshalom was ready to see his father dead. He wanted to die, kill himself, but to cause his death. Nevertheless, and David knew that he that King David called my son, my son. Why did David make this eight mention of my son? The Gemara answers. 7 of the mentioning of my son brought Absalom up from the 7 chambers of Gehenom. In other words, that when Absalom died, he was in Gehenom. Obviously, there we are talking about mystery, which we know there is Gan Eden and hates, and the hate. And regarding the other one, the eighth one, the Amri Karib Reshe Gabe Gufe. Apparently, it seems that when he was stuck in the tree with his hair, he was killed by Yoav. So the body and the head, of course, were completely separated. So by a miracle, it came, he brought the body, the head, near his, together with his body to be buried together. Beika de Amri, and the others say that there is the 8th mentioning of David in my son brought him to the world to come, in the Olam Haba. In other words, although that he was in Gehenom, he was in hell, but nevertheless, King David prayed, or with his crying, he brought him out of Gehenom to Olam Haba. Then the text continues to mention a pasuk, a verse that what Avshalom did in his life, he built a monument for himself, ואבשלום לקח לו ויצב לו בחייו, and Avshalom took and erected for himself during his lifetime, like a monument. What did he take? What did it mean he took? He built. What is, they says, and לקח, he took. What did he take? The Gemara says, אמר ריש לקיש שלקח מקח רע לעצמו. He took a bad purchase for himself. He made unwise decision, and of course, the unwise decision is that is something Yad Avshalom. The, uh, why is it continue telling us this recording? Take, there is a place in Yerushalayim, near the Mount Olives, Yad Avshalom. This erected stone, and which seemingly, I don't know if he's buried there, but this is what Avshalom erected before everything happened. אז כל פנים, said, אשר בעמק המלך, the valley of the king, אמר בחנינה, ביצה עמוקה של מלכו של עולם. This alludes to the fact that the entire episode of Avshalom took place through the deep counsel of the king of universe. In other words, this is Hashem decreed after David's involvement with Bathsheba, that such a rebellion would befall him. So this was like a punishment for David with Bathsheba. And that the verse teaches that Avshalom carried out his actions. This was like Hashem, it was Hashem's plan to punish David for the relationship, the forbidden relationship with Bathsheba. So beside the fact that already David accepted the son that Bathsheba had from him died, and he was crying, and Nathan, the prophet, he gave him hell for the way he did, and there is, we see in the book of Psalms, Tehillim, how David actually was crying and regretting what he did. But it says here that one of the things that was the prophet said הנני מקים עליך רע מביתך, reading now 11, page 11a1. In the beginning, it is written regarding David, behold, I shall raise evil against you from your own household. So this was meant that, as you see in the notes down in the bottom, this prophecy was told to King David after his indiscretion with Bathsheba. Avshalom was carrying out the divine plan that was foretold such much earlier. כיוצא בדבר, I continue to read in the text in the top. In a similar way, you may expound it, that now the Gemara brings another example, that we see stories which we don't realize that this is part of a plan that HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes the plan to that this happens. כיוצא בדבר, similar way you may expound the verse by וישלחהו מעמק חברון. It says that Yaakov sent Yosef to fight about his brothers. So he said, Yaakov sent him Emek Hebron. Emek Hebron means the valley of Hebron. But the Gemara puts into it something much deeper than just geographic place. אמר רב חנינא בר אבא, בעצה עמוקה של אותו צדיק שקבור בחברון. The verse alludes to a deep counsel of that righteous one, which means Abraham, who is buried in Hebron. Because it says in the story to Abraham, ידוע תדע כי גר יהיה זרעך. It's written to Abraham, know with certainty that your offspring shall be strangers in a land not their own. So I want to say that this actually pertaining to Yosef means that he was sent to start the prophecy which was given to Abraham, because we know the story that Yosef went to see his brothers, and the brother wanted to kill him because they were jealous, and then they sold him, and eventually Yosef got to Egypt, and afterwards, when he was in prison, and then he came out to be the vice king. So all this is a plan. When he says, "Vayishlacheu me'emek Hebron," this was still something which was said in the prophecy to Abraham. This is going to happen. Now the Gemara returns to the verse about Avshalom. Amar, Avshalom said, "I have no child." And the Gemara asked, what does it mean Avshalom said, didn't Avshalom have children? Active, it was written, it is written, and 3 sons and 1 daughter were born to Avshalom. Answer Rabbi Yitzchak, but he meant I haven't got a child. Rabbi Yitzchak meant, he means, שלא הגון, היה לו בן הגון למלכות. It means that he had no child fit for royalty. So this is when he said, he therefore erected a monument so that people would be more likely to remember him. So this monument, Yad Avshalom, which I mentioned, you can see it in Yerushalayim, this monument, this was a plan of Avshalom realized that nothing will remain from him to be remembered in the royalty, so at least he thought that people should remember those words of Shalom by erecting this stone. Then the Gemara continues, of Chizda said, we have a tradition that anyone who burns the produce of his fellows will not have a son to inherit him. And why does it apply to Avshalom? Because Avshalom burned the produce of Yoav. Yoav, as I said, was the general of David, and was a big fight between them. And Avshalom burnt the produce of Yoav, as it's written, Vayomer el Avadav, and he says, he sent to his servants, take note of Yoav's field that is next to mine, where he has barley, and go and set it on fire. So Avshalom's servants set the field on fire. Thus, although Avshalom had children, as we said, 3 sons and a daughter, they did not live to inherit him. And this was a punishment, a measure for a measure to punish Avshalom. So this is what the Mishnah alludes by the story of Avshalom, showing again a measure for a measure, bad behavior and a punishment that goes together with this. And then the next, which we'll leave for next week.
I only got 2 minutes.
Rob, there's 2 minutes left.
Yeah, good. Because we finished the subject, and I'm only saying, please, I recommend go to read in the book of Samuel, second from the chapter 13 to all the story of Avshalom and what happened in the family of King David. And the next week, please God, we will deal with the good things of Measure for a Measure, dealing with Miriam, Moshe's sister. And with this, I finish to say good Shabbos to you, and we should only hear good news. Things in Israel politically is not good. The fighting, the infighting, which take toll, terrible. There is such a disunity and hatred and so on. I'm sure that you are following
Yeah.
the press, what you got at Jewish Times, or maybe the general press. Things are no good. So we have to encourage ourselves to be better people to each other.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay?
Thank you, Rabbi.
So have a good Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, we bench Rosh Chodesh and Shabbos. Month of Nisan already brings us now near Pesach. So I'm departing. Good night and good Shabbos.
Good night. Thank you
Good
very
night.
much.
Shabbos,
Everyone.
Shabbos and Chodesh Tov.
Take care, everyone.
Stay safe and healthy.